The clock inside Langford House struck 11 as Jessamy Thorne stood on the frozen steps, the January wind cutting through her thin woolen cloak like a blade. Through the grand windows above, she could see chandeliers blazing, couples dancing, champagne glasses catching the light. The New Year's Eve ball was in full celebration, and she was outside, alone, with nowhere left to go. The footman had not been cruel. He had simply looked at her with something worse than cruelty, pity mixed with fear, and spoken words that sealed her fate. "I'm sorry, miss. Lord Langford has instructed that you are not to be admitted, by request of the Hartley family." Of course, Selwyn's reach extended everywhere now. She had walked down the steps slowly, aware that eyes were watching from the windows, aware that her humiliation was being witnessed by half of London's society. Let them watch. Let them see what happened to women who dared to speak the truth. 3 weeks ago, she had been Jessamy Thorne, beloved fiancée of Viscount Selwyn Hartley, daughter of a respectable country physician, a woman on the cusp of entering the upper echelons of society. Now she was nothing. Less than nothing. A madwoman, according to the rumors Selwyn had so carefully spread. Hysterical. Delusional. Dangerous. All because she had found the ledgers. She closed her eyes, remembering. A week before Christmas, she had wandered into Lord Hartley's private study looking for writing paper. Instead, she had found a locked drawer that was not quite locked, and inside, documents that made her blood turn to ice. Names of children, orphans, dozens of them. Each entry noted their inherited wealth, the date guardianship was acquired, and then a systematic accounting of funds drained, estates sold, fortunes vanished. And beside nearly every name, a final notation. Transferred to St. Crispin's industrial home. Jessamy knew St. Crispin's. Everyone knew it. A workhouse in the northern counties where children went in and rarely came out. Where inherited fortunes meant nothing because the children had been legally stripped of everything before they ever arrived. The Hartleys were not just stealing from orphans, they were destroying them. When she had confronted Selwyn, his handsome face had shifted into something she had never seen before. Not anger, not shame. Just cold, calculating assessment, like a man examining a ledger that no longer balanced. "You shouldn't have found that," he had said quietly. "How could you? These are children, Selwyn. Children who trusted your family to protect them. These are investments." His voice had remained pleasant, reasonable. "And you, my dear Jessamy, have just become a liability." Within 48 hours, her life had been dismantled. Selwyn told society she had suffered a nervous collapse, that she was making wild accusations born of hysteria. Her own father, terrified of the Hartley influence, had closed his door to her. Her mother had wept, but would not defy him. Her sister had looked at her with doubt in her eyes, and now here she stood, on New Year's Eve, with 17 shillings in her pocket, no home, no family, and no one in the world who believed her. The wind picked up, driving ice crystals against her face. The temperature was dropping rapidly. She had heard whispers among the servants at her boarding house that this would be the coldest night of the year. People would freeze in the streets tonight. Beggars, drunks, women with nowhere to go. Jessamy pulled her cloak tighter and began walking down the drive. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not stand still. Standing still meant freezing. Standing still meant dying. Behind her, she heard the great doors of Langford House open again. She did not turn. Probably another guest arriving, another witness to her disgrace. Let them look. Let them. "Miss Thorne." A man's voice, deep, commanding, cutting through the wind like it owned the air itself. Jessamy stopped. She turned slowly, expecting another footman, another dismissal, another humiliation to add to her collection. Instead, she saw a man standing at the top of the steps, silhouetted against the golden light pouring from the ballroom. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in immaculate evening clothes that probably cost more than her father earned in a year. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, though his face appeared no older than his early 30s. His features were sharp, aristocratic, and his pale gray eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She knew that face. Everyone in England knew that face. Hadrian Vance, the Duke of Ashworth, the most powerful man in the northern counties, and according to everything Selwyn had ever told her, the Hartley family's most bitter enemy. "Miss Thorne," the Duke repeated, his voice carrying effortlessly across the frozen air. "I believe you were looking for entry to this ball." She stared at him, her mind unable to process what was happening. "I was refused," she finally managed. "By order of the Hartleys." "Yes." His eyes flickered with something cold and dangerous. "I witnessed that." "Then you know I cannot enter." "I know no such thing." He descended 2 steps, then stopped. The golden light from the doorway carved his face into planes of shadow and illumination. "I know that Lord Langford refused you entry at the request of a family I consider beneath contempt. I know that you are standing in the cold while people who matter less than you are drinking champagne inside." His voice dropped, and though he did not move closer, Jessamy felt as if he had crossed the entire distance between them. "And I know that I am a duke, Miss Thorne, which means that anyone I invite into this ballroom enters regardless of what the Hartleys have requested." He extended his hand. "Come inside." Jessamy's heart was hammering. This had to be a trap. Dukes did not rescue disgraced women from frozen doorsteps. Powerful men did not defy other powerful families without reason. But the cold was biting deeper. Her fingers were growing numb. And inside that ballroom, Selwyn Hartley was probably laughing with his friends, celebrating another enemy neutralized, another threat silenced. She looked at the Duke's outstretched hand. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "Because you have information I need," he said simply. "And because watching the Hartleys suffer is one of the few pleasures I allow myself." It was not a kind answer. It was not a romantic answer. It was an honest one. Jessamy climbed the steps and took his hand. His grip was firm and warm, startling against the ice that had seeped into her bones. The Duke did not smile as he led her toward the doors. He moved with the certainty of a man who had never been denied anything in his life, and when the footman's eyes widened at the sight of Jessamy on his arm, the Duke's expression did not change. "The lady is my guest," he said. It was not a statement that invited discussion. "Your Grace, Lord Langford specifically." "Lord Langford may take his objections to me personally." The Duke's voice remained pleasant, but something in it made the footman take a step backward. "In the meantime, Miss Thorne will enter." They swept through the doors before anyone could respond. The heat of the ballroom hit Jessamy like a wave, making her skin prickle painfully as frozen nerves came back to life. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across hundreds of guests in silks and diamonds. And every eye, it seemed, was turning toward her. No, not toward her, toward the man whose arm she held. "They are staring," she murmured. "They always stare at me. Tonight they have better reason than most." The Duke guided her around the edge of the dance floor, moving with a deliberate slowness that ensured maximum visibility. "Smile, Miss Thorne. You have just walked into the lion's den, and the lions need to see that you are not afraid." "I am afraid." "I know. Smile anyway." She forced her lips to curve upward, though her heart was racing so hard she could feel it in her throat. Across the ballroom, she saw faces she recognized. Lady Whitmore, who had once complimented her embroidery at a tea party, now turning away as if Jessamy were contagious. Sir Edmund Cross, who had danced with her at the Hartley Christmas ball, suddenly fascinated by his champagne glass, and there, Near the fireplace, surrounded by admirers as always, stood Selwyn Hartley. His golden hair gleamed in the firelight. His smile was charming, confident, the smile of a man who had everything and knew it. He was laughing at something one of his companions had said, completely at ease. Then his gaze drifted across the room and found her. The smile froze on his face. Jessamy felt a savage satisfaction watching the color drain from Selwyn's cheeks. He had expected her to disappear. He had expected her to die in obscurity, a cautionary tale about hysteria and broken engagements. Instead, she was standing in the most prestigious ballroom in London on the arm of the most powerful duke in England. "He sees you," Hadrian Vance murmured beside her. "Good. Let him wonder." "Wonder what?" "What you have told me. What I know. What I am planning to do about it." The Duke guided her toward a doorway leading off the main ballroom. "But first, we need to talk. Somewhere private." He led her through the doorway and down a corridor lined with portraits of Langford ancestors. The noise of the ball faded behind them, replaced by the muffled sounds of their footsteps on marble. Finally, he opened a door and gestured her inside. It was a small study, clearly not intended for guests tonight. A fire burned low in the grate, casting flickering shadows across leather-bound books and a writing desk. The Duke closed the door behind them and turned to face her. In the intimate firelight, he looked less like a statue and more like a man. The lines around his eyes suggested sleepless nights. The set of his jaw spoke of tension carefully controlled. And his gaze, when it met hers, held something that might have been grief buried beneath layers of ice. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair by the fire. "You are still shaking." Jessamy had not realized she was trembling until he said it. The cold had gone deeper than she knew. She sank into the chair, grateful for the warmth, and watched as the Duke poured something amber from a crystal decanter. "Brandy," he said, pressing the glass into her hands. "Drink. It will help." She drank, feeling the liquid burn down her throat and spread warmth through her chest. The Duke did not sit. He stood by the fireplace, one arm resting on the mantel, watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Now," he said quietly, "tell me about the ledgers." Jessamy's fingers tightened on the glass. "How do you know about the ledgers?" "I know the Hartleys have been running a scheme involving orphaned children and stolen inheritances. I know you discovered evidence of this scheme, and that is why they destroyed you." He paused. "What I do not know is the specifics, the names, the amounts, the locations. That is what you are going to tell me." "Why should I tell you anything? I do not know you. For all I know, this is another trap." "If I wanted to trap you, Miss Thorne, I would not have rescued you from freezing to death on Lord Langford's doorstep." His voice was dry. "I would have let the cold finish what Selwyn started." "What Selwyn started?" The Duke's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "You think being cast out into society with no resources, no allies, and no one to believe your story was an accident. You think the rumors spreading so quickly and so thoroughly happened naturally?" He shook his head. "Selwyn Hartley is methodical. He destroyed your reputation so completely that no one would listen to your accusations. He ensured your family abandoned you so you would have nowhere to turn. And he made certain you were shut out of every house in London so that when the cold killed you, it would look like a tragic accident." Jessamy felt the blood drain from her face. "You think he wanted me to die tonight?" "I think he expected you to die tonight." The Duke's voice was soft, dangerous. "The coldest night of the year, and every door in the city closed to you. Where were you planning to go when you left those steps?" She had no answer. She had not been planning. She had simply been walking. "That is what I thought." He pushed away from the fireplace and pulled a chair across from her, sitting so their knees almost touched. This close, she could see the intensity burning in his eyes, barely contained. "The Hartleys have taken everything from you, Miss Thorne. Your reputation, your family, nearly your life. They expected you to disappear quietly. Instead, you are sitting in this room with me, and that means you have a choice. What choice? You can walk out of this house tonight, take whatever money I give you, and try to start a new life somewhere far from here. You will probably survive. You will certainly never see justice. He leaned forward slightly. Or you can help me destroy them. The fire crackled in the silence that followed his words. Jessamy stared at the Duke, searching his face for any sign of deception, any hint that this was another elaborate cruelty designed to break her further. She found nothing but cold, controlled fury. And beneath it, something that looked almost like pain. "Why do you want to destroy them?" she asked quietly. "Because they killed someone I loved." His voice did not waver, but his hands, resting on his knees, tightened almost imperceptibly. 5 years ago, they made it look like an accident, a fall from a horse during a hunt. But I knew better. I have always known. Who? My brother. The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Nathaniel. He was investigating the Hartley finances. He had found threads that suggested something wrong, something systematic. He was getting close to the truth. And they killed him for it. They killed him for it. The Duke's jaw tightened. I have spent 5 years trying to prove what they did. 5 years gathering fragments, building cases that always fell apart because the Hartleys are meticulous about destroying evidence. 5 years watching them grow richer on the suffering of children, while my brother's murderers drank champagne at balls like this one. He met her eyes, and for the first time, Jessamy saw the man beneath the title. Exhausted, grieving, and absolutely relentless. Then you appeared. A woman who has actually seen their ledgers, who knows names and dates and amounts, who can testify to the specifics of their scheme. His voice dropped. You are the weapon I have been waiting for, Miss Thorne. The question is whether you are willing to be wielded. Jessamy set down her brandy glass, her mind racing. If I help you, they will come after me. They already tried to kill me once. They will try again, the Duke agreed, which is why you need protection they cannot penetrate. What kind of protection? He was silent for a moment. The fire popped and hissed between them. I am the Duke of Ashworth, he said finally. I control estates across 3 counties, employ over 1,000 people, and hold enough political influence to sway elections. The Hartleys are powerful, but they are not untouchable. Under my protection, you would be beyond their reach. Why would you protect me? You said yourself I am a weapon. Weapons are useful only until they break. You negotiated terms while standing in a ballroom full of people who wanted you dead. A flash of admiration crossed his face. You did not collapse when you saw Selwyn. You did not run. You smiled because I told you to, and you walked into this room to hear my proposition even though every instinct must have been screaming that this was a trap. He shook his head. You are not a weapon that breaks easily, Miss Thorne. I suspect you are forged from something far stronger than the Hartleys anticipated. Jessamy felt heat rise to her cheeks. I am merely a woman with nothing left to lose. That is the most dangerous thing a person can be. He stood, crossing to the writing desk, and returned with a folded piece of paper. This is a list of names, children who were placed under Hartley guardianship in the past 10 years. I compiled it from public records, but public records only tell me they existed. They do not tell me what happened to them. Jessamy took the paper, scanning the names. Her stomach turned as she recognized several from the ledgers she had seen. Some of these children are dead, she said quietly, or worse than dead. Sold to workhouses, stripped of everything, their identities erased. Can you identify which ones? Can you remember the specifics? I remember everything. She looked up at him. I read those ledgers for 2 hours before Selwyn found me. Dates, amounts, destinations, the records of where they sent the funds, where they transferred the children. I can recreate most of it from memory. For the first time, something like hope flickered in the Duke's gray eyes. Then we can build a case, a real case, with evidence that cannot be dismissed as hysteria or slander. It will be my word against theirs, the word of a disgraced woman against one of England's most respected families. It will be your word, backed by my resources, my investigators, and my influence. He moved closer, feet standing over her chair. And when we find the physical evidence, and we will find it, your testimony will be the key that locks them away forever. Jessamy thought of the children in those ledgers, the small fortunes stolen, the young lives destroyed. She thought of her own family, who had chosen fear over faith, who had abandoned her when she needed them most, and she thought of Selwyn's face in the ballroom, the shock and fear that had replaced his confident smile. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I need to know what I am agreeing to, not vague promises of protection, specifics." "Very well." The Duke sat back down across from her. "You will come to Ashworth Hall as my guest. You will have your own rooms, your own servants, complete freedom of movement within the estate. In public, we will present you as a distant cousin who has come to assist with estate management, a respectable cover that explains your presence without requiring you to hide. And in private? In private, we will work together to build our case against the Hartleys. You will help me identify the victims, trace the money, find the evidence we need. When we are ready, we will expose them publicly, legally, completely. How long will this take? Months? Perhaps longer?" He held her gaze. "This is not a quick victory, Miss Thorne. It is a campaign. The Hartleys have spent decades building their empire of cruelty. Tearing it down will require patience, precision, and absolute commitment. And if I want to leave, if it becomes too dangerous or I simply cannot continue, then you leave." His voice was firm. "I will provide you with funds, references, whatever you need to start a new life elsewhere. You are not my prisoner. You are my ally. But only for as long as you choose to be." Jessamy studied him, weighing his words against everything she had learned about powerful men. Selwyn had been charming, kind, attentive, until she became inconvenient. This man made no pretense of charm. He offered no warmth, no false promises of affection. He was offering a transaction, pure and simple. And somehow that honesty felt more trustworthy than all of Selwyn's sweetness. "I have one condition," she said. "Name it." "The children. When we expose the Hartleys, I want the surviving victims found and helped. Not just justice for what was done to them, but actual assistance, funds to start new lives, education, whatever they need." His features softened unexpectedly into something that looked almost like respect. "That was already my intention," he said quietly. "But I am glad you asked for it." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Thorne?" Jessamy looked at his hand. Strong, scarred across the knuckles, belonging to a man who had just offered to make her his ally in a war against the people who had destroyed her. 3 hours ago, she had been freezing on a doorstep, waiting to die. Now she was being offered a chance to fight back. She took his hand. "We have an agreement, Your Grace." His grip was firm, warm, and held hers a moment longer than necessary. "Then welcome to the war, Miss Thorne." He released her hand and stood. "Now, I believe there is a ball happening outside this room, and Selwyn Hartley is watching the door, waiting to see if you have fled or crumbled. I think we should disappoint him." "You want me to go back out there?" "I want you to walk back into that ballroom on my arm and let every person in attendance see that you are not afraid. I want Selwyn to spend the rest of the night wondering what you told me and what I am planning to do about it." He offered his arm, and for the first time his lips curved into something that might have been a smile. After all, Miss Thorne, it is almost midnight. The new year is about to begin. His eyes glittered with cold amusement. Let us make certain the Hartleys remember who ruined it for them. Jessamy stood, ignoring the trembling in her legs, the exhaustion pulling at her bones. She placed her hand on his arm. And after midnight? She asked. After midnight, I take you to Ashworth Hall, where you will be safe, warm, and far from anyone who wishes you harm. He led her toward the door. But first, we have an entrance to make. He opened the door, and the sound of the ballroom flooded toward them. Music, laughter, the chatter of 100 people who had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to shift. Jessamy squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. 3 weeks ago, she had been abandoned by everyone she loved. Tonight she had been turned away from the only warmth in the city, left to freeze in the darkness. But a duke had seen her. A duke had chosen her. And now she was about to walk back into the lion's den and show them all that Jessamy Thorne was not so easily destroyed. The clock began to strike midnight. The carriage rolled through iron gates as dawn broke over the Yorkshire moors, painting the frost-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Jessamy had not slept during the journey from London. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Selwyn's face at midnight, the shock that had curdled into fury when the Duke had led her back into the ballroom and danced the first waltz of the new year with her. The whispers had been deafening, the stares relentless, but she had survived. Now, as Ashworth Hall rose before her, she understood for the first time the true scale of what she had agreed to. The house was not a house. It was a fortress built from black stone that seemed to drink the morning light. 4 stories of imposing architecture stretched across the hilltop, flanked by 2 wings that curved like arms waiting to embrace or trap. Narrow windows studded the walls at irregular intervals, more defensive than decorative. The central tower rose another 2 stories above the main structure, flying the Ashworth banner, a silver falcon on a field of midnight blue. It was built during the Wars of the Roses, the Duke said from beside her, breaking hours of silence. My ancestors chose defensibility over beauty. It is both, Jessamy heard herself say. He glanced at her, something stirring in his gray eyes. Most people find it forbidding. Most people have never been locked out in the cold. She met his gaze. To me, it looks like safety. The carriage stopped in the central courtyard. Before Jessamy could move, the great oak doors swung open and servants began streaming out, footmen in silver-trimmed livery, maids in crisp black and white, all arranging themselves into precise lines. At their head stood a woman who appeared to be carved from the same black stone as the house itself. Tall, angular, with steel-gray hair pulled back so severely it seemed to stretch her features, she watched the carriage with eyes that missed nothing. The Duke descended first, then turned to help Jessamy down. Her legs nearly buckled. Exhaustion, cold, and lingering shock combining into a wave of weakness she had to fight to hide. His hand tightened on hers for just a moment, steadying. Mrs. Pemberton, he said, addressing the formidable woman. This is Miss Jessamy Thorne. She will be staying with us indefinitely. See that she has everything she requires. Mrs. Pemberton's gaze swept over Jessamy. The travel-worn cloak, the shadows beneath her eyes, the careful way she held herself upright. Whatever assessment she made, she kept it hidden behind a mask of professional neutrality. Welcome to Ashworth Hall, Miss Thorne. Her voice was clipped but not unkind. Your rooms have been prepared in the East Wing. I trust they will be satisfactory. Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton. The Duke keeps to the West Wing. Mrs. Pemberton began walking toward the doors, clearly expecting Jessamy to follow. You will find him in the library most evenings, or in his study during the day. Meals are served at 8, 1, and 7. If you require anything between meals, ring for a maid. Inside, Ashworth Hall was warmer than its exterior suggested. Fires blazed in massive hearths. Tapestries depicting hunting scenes and battle victories covered the stone walls, adding color to the gray. The central staircase rose in a graceful spiral, dark wood polished to a gleam. Mrs. Pemberton led her up 2 flights and through a maze of corridors until they reached a door at the end of the east wing. "Your suite, Miss Thorne?" The rooms were larger than her family's entire cottage, a sitting room with velvet chairs and a writing desk, a bedroom dominated by a 4-poster bed draped in deep blue curtains, a dressing room with wardrobes that stood empty, waiting, and through an archway, a private bathing room with a copper tub already steaming with hot water. "His Grace has arranged for a seamstress to call tomorrow," Mrs. Pemberton said. "You will need appropriate clothing. He has also engaged tutors for etiquette, household management, and estate affairs." Jessamy turned to look at her. "Tutors?" "His Grace believes in preparation." Mrs. Pemberton's expression remained neutral, but something in her voice suggested approval. "If you are to move in society as his ally, you must be above reproach. Every fork, every curtsy, every conversation, flawless." "How long do I have?" "The Hartleys are hosting their winter ball at Thorndale Abbey in 12 days. His Grace intends for you to attend." 12 days? 12 days to transform from a disgraced physician's daughter into someone who could hold her own among the highest circles of society. 12 days before she would face Selwyn again. "That is not much time," Jessamy said quietly. "No, it is not." Mrs. Pemberton moved toward the door, then paused. "But Miss Thorne, the Duke does not make careless decisions. If he believes you can do this, then you can." Her eyes met Jessamy's. "Do not prove him wrong." After Mrs. Pemberton left, Jessamy sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the weight of everything that had happened. 24 hours ago, she had been standing on frozen steps, waiting to die. Now she was in a duke's fortress, surrounded by luxury, being prepared for a war she barely understood. On the bedside table she noticed a small leather-bound book that had not been there before. She picked it up, finding pages filled with precise, angular handwriting. "Miss Thorne, the coming weeks will be difficult. I do not offer false comfort or easy promises. What I offer is purpose, protection, and the opportunity to make the people who hurt you answer for their crimes. This book contains everything you need to know about Ashworth, its history, its enemies, and the role you will play. Study it. Memorize it. When we face the Hartleys, you must know more about this world than they expect. We dine together each evening at 7. Use that time to ask questions. I will answer what I can. Remember our agreement. You help me destroy them. I keep you safe." Ashworth Jessamy closed the book and looked out the window at the moors stretching endlessly toward the horizon. She had been abandoned by her family, betrayed by the man she had trusted, left to die in the cold. But she was not dead. She was here, in a fortress that had never fallen, with a duke who wanted the same thing she did. Somewhere in London, Selwyn Hartley was wondering how she had survived and what she had told his enemy. Let him wonder. Let him fear. She had 12 days to become someone he could not destroy. The next 11 days blurred into a relentless rhythm of lessons, fittings, and preparation. Jessamy woke each morning at 6, when a maid named Blythe brought tea and laid out her clothes. By 7, she was in the small parlor adjacent to the library, facing whatever tutor the Duke had summoned for her that day. Mr. Alderton taught etiquette with the precision of a military campaign. Which fork for fish? Which spoon for soup? How to curtsy to a countess versus a duchess? How to navigate a receiving line without giving offense? How to accept a compliment, deflect an insult, and retreat from a conversation that had grown dangerous, all while maintaining perfect posture and an expression of serene confidence. "Your spine, Miss Thorne," he would say, rapping her shoulder with his wooden pointer. A lady's spine is her sword, straight as steel, always. Mrs. Blackwood handled household management, the complex machinery of running a great estate, menus, staff hierarchies, accounts, how to conduct morning interviews with the housekeeper, how to review household expenses without appearing to question the servant's honesty, how to handle tradesmen, visitors, and the inevitable crises that arose in any large establishment. "You may never need to run a household of this size," Mrs. Blackwood said during one lesson, "but you must appear as though you could. Competence commands respect, Miss Thorne. Never forget that." And in the evenings, there was the Duke. They dined together in a small room adjacent to the formal dining hall, a space that felt almost intimate despite its high ceilings and dark wood paneling. The table could seat 12, but they sat at opposite ends of just 6 chairs, close enough for conversation but far enough to maintain the careful distance that seemed to define their arrangement. "Tell me about the Hartley estate in Hampshire," the Duke said on the third evening, "the one they use for guardianship transfers." Jessamy set down her fork, calling up the memory. "Thornwick Manor. It is listed as a charitable home for orphaned children, but I never saw evidence of any children actually living there. The ledgers showed funds flowing in, inheritances, trust disbursements, but the corresponding expenses were minimal. Food, clothing, education, all far below what you would expect for the number of children supposedly in residence. Because the children were not there. Because the children were being moved elsewhere. St. Crispin's, mostly. Sometimes other workhouses, places where no one would ask questions about their backgrounds or their inheritance rights." The Duke's jaw tightened. "And the documentation?" "Forged guardianship orders. False death certificates for children who were simply transferred. Medical statements claiming the children were unfit to manage their own affairs." Jessamy's voice hardened. The Hartleys were not just stealing money, they were erasing people. Children who had no one to speak for them, no one to notice when they disappeared. "My brother noticed." The words hung in the air between them. Jessamy looked at the Duke, really looked, and saw the grief he usually kept so carefully hidden. "Tell me about him," she said quietly. "Nathaniel." For a long moment she thought he would refuse, his face closed, the familiar mask descending. Then, slowly, he spoke. "He was 3 years younger than me, brilliant with numbers, hopeless with people. He could look at a column of figures and see patterns that no one else could find. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He once caught a steward embezzling by noticing that the grain accounts were off by a fraction of a percent over 7 years. 7 years of tiny discrepancies that no one else had ever seen. That sounds remarkable. It was. It also made him dangerous to people who had things to hide." The Duke's hand tightened around his wineglass. "He started investigating the Hartleys 3 years before he died. Small things at first. Irregularities in their investment returns, questions about their charitable work. He believed something was wrong, but he could not prove it. And then? And then he got close. Too close. He sent me a letter the week before he died, saying he had found something that would destroy them. Evidence they could not explain away. He was going to meet someone, an informant inside the Hartley household. He never made it to the meeting. His horse threw him the day before, broke his neck instantly, they said. A tragic accident." He spoke flatly, every word controlled. "Except that Nathaniel was the finest horseman I have ever known. He had ridden that same trail 100 times, and the informant he was supposed to meet disappeared the same day. Never found, never heard from again." Jessamy felt cold despite the fire blazing in the hearth. "They killed him. And the witness. They killed them both. And they destroyed whatever evidence Nathaniel had gathered. I found his study ransacked when I arrived for the funeral. Every paper, every note, every scrap of research. Gone. I am sorry." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Do not be sorry. Be useful. His eyes met hers, and the grief had hardened into something fiercer. You have seen their ledgers. You remember their methods. You are the evidence they thought they had destroyed. Is that all I am to you? Evidence? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Something vulnerable, something she had not meant to reveal. The Duke was silent for a long moment. Then he set down his wineglass and leaned forward. When I found you on those steps, he said slowly, I saw an opportunity, a weapon against my enemies. That is the truth, and I will not pretend otherwise. And now? Now I see a woman who has survived what should have destroyed her. Who negotiates terms when she has no leverage? Who asks about the children before she asks about herself? His gaze held hers. You are still useful to me, Miss Thorne, but you are also becoming something I did not anticipate. What is that? Someone I would protect even if you were not useful. The words landed between them like a spark near kindling. Jessamy felt heat rise to her cheeks, felt something shift in the air that she was not ready to examine. We should discuss the ball, she said quickly, the winter celebration. A flicker of amusement crossed his face. He knew she was retreating, but he allowed it. Yes, we should. The lessons continued. The fittings multiplied. By the 10th day, Jessamy had 3 new gowns and a growing sense that she might actually survive what was coming. But it was on the 11th night that everything changed. She was in the library, reviewing the Duke's notes on Hartley business connections, when he entered with a letter in his hand. His face was thunderous. What is wrong? She asked immediately. Word from London. He handed her the letter. The Hartleys have been asking questions about your family, your parents, your sister. Jessamy's blood turned to ice. Tansy, she is only 16. They have not approached her yet. But my informant says Selwyn has been making inquiries about where your family lives, what your father's financial situation is. He is looking for leverage. He would not hurt a child. He left you to freeze to death on the coldest night of the year. The Duke's voice carried an edge of steel. Do not tell me what he would or would not do. Jessamy stood, the letter crumpling in her fist. I have to warn them. You have to do nothing except trust me. The Duke caught her arm as she moved toward the door. I have already sent men to Hampshire. Your family will be offered the choice to come here, under my protection, before the week is out. And if they refuse? Her voice cracked. My father closed his door to me. He believed the rumors. He might not. He might not accept help from the man protecting his disgraced daughter. The Duke's grip on her arm gentled. Then we make other arrangements. Guards who watch from a distance. Warning systems. Whatever it takes. Why would you do this? Protecting me is one thing. I am useful to you. But my family has nothing to offer. They have you. His voice was quiet, certain. And you cannot focus on destroying the Hartleys if you are terrified for your sister's safety. That is strategic thinking, not kindness. Perhaps. His thumb brushed across her wrist, a touch so brief she might have imagined it. Or perhaps I am simply tired of watching the Hartleys hurt people I... He stopped. Jessamy looked up at him. People you what? People I have chosen to protect. He released her arm and stepped back. Get some rest, Miss Thorne. Tomorrow is the winter ball. You will need your strength. He was gone before she could respond, leaving Jessamy alone with the fire and the weight of everything he had almost said. Thorndale Abbey blazed with light against the January darkness, its windows glowing like 100 golden eyes watching the carriages arrive. The Hartley family's country estate was smaller than Ashworth Hall, but deliberately ornate. All white marble columns and gilded trim, designed to project wealth and taste to anyone who might be watching. Jessamy watched it approach through the carriage window and felt her stomach clench. "Breathe." The Duke's voice came from beside her, steady and calm. "Remember what we discussed. Enter together. Remain visible. Engage with allies. Do not confront the Hartleys directly unless they approach first. And if Selwyn tries to corner you alone, signal you immediately. Under no circumstances engage without backup." "Good." He adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture she had come to recognize as his version of nervous energy. "You look like a duchess, Miss Thorne. Now act like one." She glanced down at herself. The seamstress had outdone herself. Deep sapphire silk that made her dark hair gleam, a neckline modest enough for respectability, but striking enough to command attention. Diamonds borrowed from the Ashworth collection glittered at her throat and ears. She looked like someone who belonged in ballrooms. She did not feel like someone who belonged anywhere. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door. The Duke descended first, then turned to offer his hand. The moment Jessamy emerged, she felt the weight of 100 gazes. The Hartleys had invited everyone, not just Yorkshire society, but London luminaries who had made the winter journey. Word had spread about the New Year's Eve incident. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. "Ready?" the Duke murmured. "No." "Perfect. You will perform better with an edge of fear." He placed her hand on his arm. "Remember, you are not a guest here. You are a statement." They walked up the marble steps together. The ballroom was a confection of white and gold, deliberately angelic compared to Ashworth's darkness. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across dancers already filling the floor. Hothouse flowers perfumed the air. Roses, lilies, things that should not bloom in January but did, because the Hartleys had money enough to force nature itself to comply. At the far end of the room, receiving guests with practiced smiles, stood the Hartley family. Lord Aldrich Hartley, Selwyn's father, was a large man whose geniality could not quite hide the calculation in his eyes. Lady Marguerite Hartley, elegant and cold, stood beside him like a marble statue given reluctant life, and between them, golden and gleaming, stood Selwyn. His smile when he saw Jessamy was perfect, warm, welcoming, as though she were a beloved friend rather than a woman he had left to die. "The Duke of Ashworth," the butler announced, "and Miss Jessamy Thorne." The room did not quite go silent, but the whispers rose like a wave. Jessamy kept her spine straight. A lady's spine is her sword, and walked forward with the Duke at her side. "Your Grace." Lord Hartley's voice was hearty, jovial. "How delightful that you could join us. And Miss Thorne, what a pleasure to see you recovered from your difficulties." "Lord Hartley." The Duke's voice was pleasant, his expression neutral. "Thank you for the invitation. Miss Thorne and I were just discussing how much we were looking forward to this evening." "Were you indeed?" Lady Hartley's smile did not reach her eyes. "How fascinating. We had heard Miss Thorne was unwell. Nerves, was it not?" "Complete fabrication, as I am sure you know." Jessamy heard her own voice, steady and clear. "I have never felt better in my life." "How fortunate." Selwyn stepped forward, and it took every ounce of control Jessamy possessed not to flinch. "May I say, Miss Thorne, you look radiant this evening. Yorkshire air must agree with you." "Safety agrees with me." She met his eyes without wavering. "I find I sleep much better when I am not worried about freezing to death on doorsteps." The words dropped into the conversation like stones into still water. Selwyn's smile flickered. Lady Hartley's expression sharpened. Lord Hartley let out a booming laugh that sounded only slightly forced. "What an imagination you have, my dear. Selwyn told us about your little difficulties. So frightening, to find yourself without friends in winter. Thank goodness you were found before anything terrible happened." "Yes." Jessamy's voice was ice. "Thank goodness." The Duke's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. A warning or support. She could not tell which. "We should not monopolize our hosts," he said smoothly. "I see Lady Ashford across the room, and I believe she was hoping to speak with Miss Thorne about charitable work in the northern counties." He guided her away before anyone could respond. "That was dangerous," he murmured once they were clear of the receiving line. "That was honest." There is a time for honesty and a time for strategy. Learn to tell the difference. Lady Ashford was indeed waiting, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, who had been one of the Duke's mother's closest friends. She greeted Jessamy with genuine warmth and drew her into a conversation about the difficulties of supporting orphaned children in rural areas. "The workhouses are dreadful," Lady Ashford said, shaking her head. "I have tried to establish better alternatives, but funding is always a challenge, and finding children before they disappear into those places is nearly impossible." "What if there were records?" Jessamy asked carefully. "Documentation of where children were sent, by whom, under what authority." Lady Ashford's eyes sharpened. "Such records would be invaluable, but they would be closely guarded by those who benefit from the current system." "Perhaps, but records can be found, evidence can be gathered." "Miss Thorne," Lady Ashford lowered her voice, "are you saying you know something specific about how certain children have been mishandled?" Before Jessamy could answer, a voice cut through the conversation. "Lady Ashford, might I steal Miss Thorne for a dance?" Selwyn stood there, hand extended, smile firmly in place. The request was perfectly polite, perfectly normal, perfectly impossible to refuse without creating a scene. Jessamy glanced across the room. The Duke was engaged in conversation with two older gentlemen, his back to her. The signal they had agreed upon, touching her earlobe, would not work if he was not looking. "Of course," she heard herself say. "Lady Ashford, if you will excuse me." Selwyn led her onto the dance floor just as the orchestra began a waltz. His hand settled on her waist with familiar ease, and suddenly Jessamy was transported back to the Christmas ball, before she had found the ledgers, before she had known what kind of monster wore his handsome face. "You should not have come here," Selwyn said quietly, his smile never wavering. "It was foolish." "Was it?" "Ashworth cannot protect you forever. He has enemies of his own, vulnerabilities you know nothing about. When he decides you are more trouble than you are worth, he will discard you, and you will have no one left to run to." "Is that a threat?" "It is a prediction." His grip tightened on her waist. "You could still walk away from this. Disappear somewhere far from here. I would not pursue you." "The way you did not pursue me when you left me to freeze on those streets?" His smile finally cracked. "That was regrettable. Necessary, but regrettable. I did not want it to happen that way. You destroyed my reputation. You turned my own family against me. You ensured every door in London would be closed to me on the coldest night of the year. I gave you a chance to be reasonable. You chose righteousness instead." He spun her through a turn, using the movement to pull her closer. "You still have a choice, Jessamy. Walk away now, and I will leave your family alone. Continue down this path, and everyone you love will suffer." "My family? Your father, your mother, your sweet little sister. Tansy, is it not? Such a pretty name, such a vulnerable girl." Jessamy's vision went red at the edges. "If you touch her?" "I will not have to touch anyone if you are sensible." Selwyn's voice was still pleasant, still calm. "Leave Yorkshire. Leave England if you like. Just stop helping Ashworth dig into matters that do not concern you." The waltz was ending. Jessamy pulled away from him the moment the music stopped, not caring how it looked. "You made a mistake," she said, her voice low and fierce. "When you left me in that cold, you should have made certain I was dead. I am beginning to realize that." All pretense of charm had vanished from his face. "But mistakes can be corrected, Miss Thorne. Remember that." He bowed formally and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jessamy stood alone on the edge of the dance floor, her heart pounding, her hands trembling. She touched her earlobe, the signal, and saw the Duke turn toward her immediately, his conversation abandoned mid-sentence. He was at her side in moments. What happened? He threatened Tansy, directly. Her voice was barely steady. He said, if I do not stop helping you, everyone I love will suffer. The Duke's expression went cold and still, like a frozen lake concealing dangerous depths. Then we accelerate our timeline, he said quietly. We do not wait for them to strike first. What do you mean? I mean that tomorrow we begin gathering witnesses. His eyes swept the ballroom, cataloging faces and calculating angles. Tonight, the Hartleys showed their hand. They are frightened, which means we are close. We press the advantage. And my family? We'll be at Ashworth Hall within 3 days. His hand found hers, gripping tight. I give you my word, Jessamy, they will not touch her. It was the first time he had used her Christian name. She looked up at him, this cold, strategic man who had offered her a weapon and was slowly becoming something else entirely. I believe you, she said. Good. He did not release her hand. Now, shall we give them something to worry about? What did you have in mind? Dance with me. His lips curved into something that was almost a smile. Let them see that their threats have only brought us closer. The orchestra began another waltz. The Duke led her onto the floor, and this time, when his hand settled on her waist, it felt like protection rather than possession. Around them, the Hartleys watched, and Jessamy smiled. 3 days after the winter ball, Jessamy stood in the great hall of Ashworth, watching the carriage approach through the frost-covered drive. Her hands would not stop trembling. They came, she whispered. They came. The Duke stood beside her, his presence steady as always. Your father required some persuasion, but they came. The carriage stopped. A footman opened the door, and Jessamy's mother emerged first, thinner than Jessamy remembered, her face lined with new worry. Then her father, stooped and uncertain, looking around at the massive estate with barely concealed awe. And finally, Tansy, 16 years old, with the same dark hair as Jessamy, but their mother's blue eyes. She looked frightened and confused, wrapped in a traveling cloak that was clearly inadequate for the Yorkshire winter. Jessamy was down the steps before she could think, pulling her sister into an embrace that nearly knocked them both off their feet. Jess! Tansy's voice was muffled against her shoulder. Jess, what is happening? Father said we had to leave immediately, that there was danger. There was. But you are safe now. Jessamy pulled back, holding her sister's face between her hands. I promise you, Tansy. No one will hurt you here. Her parents approached more slowly. Her mother's eyes were red-rimmed, and when she reached Jessamy, she simply stood there, as though unsure whether she was allowed to touch her own daughter. Jessamy! Her father's voice was gruff, uncomfortable. We received word that the Hartley family might pose a threat to all of us. They do. But the Duke has offered his protection. Her father's gaze moved to the man standing at the top of the steps. Whatever he saw there made him straighten slightly, some of his discomfort fading into grudging respect. We are grateful, he said finally, for the warning and the escort. It was not an apology. It was not an acknowledgement that he had been wrong to close his door, wrong to believe Selwyn's lies. But it was something. Jessamy would take what she could get. Mrs. Pemberton materialized to usher the family inside, promising warm rooms and hot meals. Jessamy watched them go, her heart aching with a complicated mixture of relief and old pain. That was not easy for you, the Duke observed quietly. No. Your father should have believed you. He should have protected you. He was frightened. The Hartleys are powerful, and he is... She struggled for words. He is a country physician with no influence and no resources. He did what he thought would keep the rest of his family safe. By sacrificing you. By making an impossible choice. She turned to face him. I understand why he did it. That does not mean it did not hurt. His expression revealed something almost vulnerable. You are more forgiving than I would be. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. Jessamy looked back at the house where her family had disappeared. I remember everything, but I also remember that they are here now and Selwyn cannot touch them. No, he cannot. They stood in silence for a moment, the cold air sharp between them. What happens now? Jessamy asked. Now we prepare for the next phase. The Duke turned toward the house. Your family's presence here will infuriate Selwyn. He will make a mistake, and when he does, we will be ready. The Duke had arranged for 3 witnesses to visit Ashworth over the following week. Former servants and business associates, who had seen pieces of the Hartley operation but had been too frightened to speak. Jessamy met with each of them in the library, the Duke observing from his chair by the fire as she drew out their stories with careful questions. Mrs. Millicent Cobb, a former governess at Thornwick Manor, wept as she described children who arrived healthy and vanished within months, transferred to better situations that never seemed to have addresses. Mr. Harold Graves, a clerk who had worked for Hartley & Associates for 15 years, provided details about double ledgers. One set for investors, one set showing where the money actually went, and Miss Dorothea Quinn, a young woman who had been one of those orphans herself before managing to escape St. Crispin's at 14, spoke in a voice flat with old trauma about what happened to children inside those walls. They take everything, she said, staring into the fire. Your name, your inheritance, your hope. By the time they are done, you do not even remember you were once someone who mattered. Jessamy reached across the space between them and took her hand. You matter. And when we expose them, everyone will know what they did to you. Miss Quinn looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Do you really believe that? That justice is possible? I have to believe it. Jessamy's grip tightened. Because the alternative is letting them win, and I refuse. Later, after the witnesses had been settled in guest rooms with promises of safety and compensation, the Duke found Jessamy in the library, staring at the stack of testimonies they had gathered. We have enough, he said quietly. Between their statements, your memories, and the financial documentation I have compiled, we can make a case. A case for what? A private accusation? A newspaper scandal? A formal investigation. He moved to stand beside her. I have allies in Parliament. Men who owe me favors. Men who despise the Hartleys for their own reasons. If we present this evidence properly, we can force an official inquiry. And the Hartleys will have no way to silence it. Not without exposing themselves further. His hand came to rest on the table beside hers, not quite touching. We present our evidence at Lord Ashford's house party next week. Half the political establishment will be there. If we make our accusations publicly, in front of witnesses who matter, they cannot make it disappear. Jessamy looked up at him. You planned this. Lord Ashford's party, the timing, all of it. I plan everything, Miss Thorne. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You should know that by now. Jessamy. He paused. What? You called me Jessamy at the ball, my Christian name. She held his gaze. If we are going to war together, you should probably keep using it. Warmth surfaced in his gaze. Very well, Jessamy. Her name in his voice sounded different than it ever had before, like a key turning in a lock she had not known existed. Hadrian, she said, testing his name in return. His breath caught almost imperceptibly. No one has called me that in years. Then perhaps it is time someone did. They stood there, the fire crackling beside them, the distance between them shrinking with each shared breath. Then Mrs. Pemberton knocked and entered with questions about dinner arrangements, and the moment shattered like thin ice. But something had changed. They both knew it, and neither of them looked away. Lord Ashford's country estate, Belmont Park, was everything Thorndale Abbey wished it could be: elegant without ostentation, grand without cruelty. The house sprawled across manicured grounds that seemed to stretch forever, and the guests who filled its halls were the very pinnacle of English society. Jessamy arrived on Hadrian's arm, dressed in deep garnet silk that the seamstress had insisted would make her unforgettable. She was not certain she wanted to be unforgettable. She would have settled for unremarkable if it meant the Hartleys would not be watching her every move. But of course, they were watching. Selwyn stood near the entrance to the grand salon, flanked by his parents. His smile when he saw her was sharp enough to cut glass. "The Duke of Ashworth and Miss Jessamy Thorne," the butler announced. Whispers rippled through the gathered guests. Everyone knew about the New Year's Eve incident now. Everyone had heard some version of the story. The disgraced bride rescued by the Duke, the rivalry between noble families, the accusations that floated just beneath the surface of polite conversation. "Steady," Hadrian murmured beside her. "Tonight we observe. Tomorrow we strike." Lord Ashford greeted them warmly, his wife directing them toward the drawing room where pre-dinner drinks were being served. Jessamy accepted a glass of champagne she had no intention of drinking, and began the careful work of being seen. She spoke with Lady Ashford about charitable work. She complimented the Countess of Redmore on her diamond parure. She discussed literature with Sir Marcus Webb and said absolutely nothing of substance while appearing to say everything. Through it all, she felt Selwyn's gaze following her like a shadow. It was nearly an hour before he made his move. "Miss Thorne." His voice came from behind her, smooth as silk over broken glass. "Might I have a word in private?" Lady Ashford glanced between them, clearly uncertain. "Lord Hartley, I am not sure." "It is quite all right." Jessamy turned to face him, her expression serene. "I have nothing to fear from Lord Hartley." She followed him to a small alcove off the main drawing room, visible enough that they could not be accused of impropriety, private enough that their conversation would not be overheard. "You should not have come here," Selwyn said without preamble. "This is your last warning. I received your last warning at Thorndale Abbey, and yet, here I am. Here you are." His smile did not reach his eyes. "Dressed in borrowed diamonds, playing at being a duchess's companion. Do you think that will protect you?" "I think the evidence we have gathered will protect me." Jessamy kept her voice light, conversational. "Testimonies from former servants, financial records showing embezzlement, names of children who were stolen and destroyed." Selwyn's composure wavered. "You are bluffing." "Am I? Ask yourself this, Selwyn. Would the Duke of Ashworth bring me here, to a gathering of the most powerful people in England, if he did not have something worth presenting? He is using you, the moment you cease to be useful. You keep saying that. But unlike you, Hadrian has never lied to me about what I am to him." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You had your chance to silence me. You left me in the cold, and I survived. Now everything you have done, everything your family has done, is going to be exposed. My family has survived accusations before. Not like this." Jessamy smiled, and for the first time she saw something like fear flicker in Selwyn's eyes. "Tomorrow, Lord Ashford is hosting a private meeting of his political allies. Your father was not invited. Would you like to guess what will be discussed?" Selwyn's hand shot out and gripped her wrist. "You have no idea what you are doing, the people you are threatening. Remove your hand." The Duke's voice cut through the alcove like a blade. Hadrian stood 3 feet away, his expression cold enough to freeze fire. Behind him, Lord Ashford and 2 other gentlemen had paused, clearly having witnessed Selwyn's grip on Jessamy's wrist. Selwyn released her immediately, stepping back. Your Grace, you were merely assaulting a woman under my protection in full view of a dozen witnesses. Hadrian's voice did not rise, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Lord Ashford, I believe Lord Hartley requires escort back to the drawing room. He seems to have forgotten how to behave in polite company. Lord Ashford's expression had hardened into something Jessamy had never seen from the genial host. Indeed, Lord Hartley, if you would come with me. Selwyn opened his mouth to protest, saw the faces arrayed against him, and closed it. He allowed himself to be led away, but his eyes found Jessamy's as he passed. The look in them promised retribution. Are you hurt? Hadrian was at her side immediately, his hands checking her wrist where Selwyn had gripped. No. He put his hands on you in anger. Hadrian's jaw was tight. That will not happen again. It does not matter. What matters is tomorrow. It matters. His fingers lingered on her wrist, gentle where Selwyn's had been harsh. Everything about you matters, Jessamy. When will you understand that? Before she could respond, Lord Ashford returned, his expression troubled. The Hartleys have departed for the evening. I suggested rather firmly that they would be more comfortable at the local inn than under my roof. He looked at Jessamy with something like admiration. Miss Thorne, it seems you have made rather powerful enemies. I have made rather powerful allies as well. She glanced at Hadrian. That matters more. Lord Ashford nodded slowly. The meeting tomorrow. Ashworth has told me what you have gathered. If even half of it is true, all of it is true, then we have a great deal to discuss. He gestured toward the drawing room. But for tonight, let us return to the party. The Hartleys may have retreated, but their allies remain, and I suspect more than a few of them are reconsidering their loyalties as we speak. The meeting convened at 11 the following morning in Lord Ashford's private study. 12 men were present, politicians, bankers, magistrates, men whose collective influence could shape the direction of the nation. Jessamy was the only woman in the room, a fact that had raised eyebrows until Hadrian had made clear that she was not merely a witness, but the source of everything they would discuss. Gentlemen, Hadrian began, what I am about to present will disturb you. It will challenge relationships some of you have maintained for years. But I ask you to hear me out completely before responding. He laid out the case with methodical precision. The guardianship scheme, the stolen inheritances, the children transferred to workhouses where they were stripped of identity and fortune alike. He presented financial records showing discrepancies that could not be explained as clerical errors. He shared testimonies from servants who had witnessed the operation firsthand. And then he turned to Jessamy. Miss Thorne saw the original ledgers. She can identify specific children, specific amounts, and specific dates. Her testimony is the key that connects all of these fragments into a coherent picture of systematic fraud and cruelty. Jessamy stood, her pulse racing but her voice steady. 3 weeks before my engagement was to be announced publicly, I entered Lord Hartley's study looking for writing paper. In a drawer that should have been locked, I found records of 47 children who had been placed under Hartley guardianship over the past decade. She described what she had seen, the columns of figures, the notations about inheritances, the final entries showing where each child had been transferred. She named names. She cited amounts. She painted a picture so detailed that no one in the room could dismiss it as hysteria or invention. When she finished, the room was silent. Lord Whitmore, a magistrate with 30 years of experience, was the first to speak. If what you say is true, this is the largest financial fraud I have encountered in my career. It is true, and it is ongoing. Hadrian spoke with icy precision. Every month that passes, more children are victimized, more fortunes are stolen, more lives are destroyed. But how do we prove it? Sir Charles Easton, a banker, leaned forward. Records can be forged. Testimonies can be bought. The Hartleys will claim Miss Thorne is a scorned woman seeking revenge. Then we do not rely on Miss Thorne's testimony alone. Hadrian pulled out another folder. We demand access to Thornwick Manor, where the guardianship transfers are processed. We audit the accounts of Hartley and Associates, which several of your own clients have invested in. We find the children who were sent to St. Crispin's and take their statements. That would require formal investigation, Lord Whitmore said slowly. Warrants, official proceedings. Yes, it would. The Hartleys have friends in the judiciary. They will fight this. Let them fight. Hadrian's eyes swept the room. Every objection they raise will only draw more attention. Every delay will give us more time to gather evidence, and when the truth finally emerges, and it will emerge, anyone who stood with them will be destroyed alongside them. The gentlemen exchanged glances. Jessamy could see calculations happening behind their eyes. Political risks weighed against moral obligations, personal relationships measured against potential scandal. It was Lord Ashford who spoke next. I have known the Hartley family for 20 years. Lord Aldrich served on 3 committees with me. His wife attended my daughter's christening. He paused. And I believe every word Miss Thorne has said. One by one, the others nodded. Then we are agreed, Hadrian said. Lord Whitmore, you will initiate the formal inquiry. Sir Charles, you will quietly alert investors to the irregularities in Hartley accounts. Lord Ashford, you will ensure that the proper authorities are involved before the Hartleys can destroy evidence. And you, Ashworth? Lord Whitmore asked. What will you do? I will make sure Miss Thorne remains alive long enough to testify. The meeting ended near 2 o'clock. Jessamy stepped out onto the terrace for air, her mind still reeling from what had just happened. They had done it. They had convinced some of the most powerful men in England to take action against the Hartleys. It was almost over. Miss Thorne. She turned. A servant she did not recognize stood at the edge of the terrace, holding a folded piece of paper. A message for you, miss. Urgent. She took the paper, frowning. The servant disappeared before she could question him. The note was written in elegant script she did not recognize. Miss Thorne, your sister is no longer at Ashworth Hall. If you wish to see her alive again, you will come to the old chapel at the edge of Lord Ashford's property within the hour. Come alone. Tell no one. If Ashworth follows you, Tansy dies. The paper slipped from Jessamy's numb fingers. No. 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 She had left Tansy at Ashworth, surrounded by servants and guards. Safe. Protected. But the Hartleys had spies everywhere. Someone inside must have helped them. They had reached her anyway. Jessamy looked toward the house where Hadrian was still speaking with the other gentlemen. If she told him, he would insist on coming. And if he came, Tansy dies. She picked up the note, tucked it into her sleeve, and walked toward the chapel. The chapel was ancient, half ruined, its stone walls covered in ivy and its windows long since shattered. It stood at the far edge of Lord Ashford's property, hidden from the main house by a thick copse of winter-bare trees. Jessamy approached slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Hello? Her voice echoed off the broken stones. I am here. Show yourself. Movement in the shadows. Then Lady Marguerite Hartley emerged, dragging Tansy by the arm. Her sister's face was pale, tear-streaked, a bruise forming on her cheek. Her wrists were bound with rope. Jess! Tansy's voice cracked with fear. Jess, I am so sorry. They came to my room. They said, Hush! Lady Hartley's grip tightened, making Tansy whimper. You will be quiet unless spoken to. Let her go. Jessamy's voice shook despite her efforts to control it. She has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. She is the reason you will do exactly as I say. Lady Hartley stepped closer, keeping Tansy between them like a shield. The investigation ends. Today. You will go back to those men and tell them you fabricated everything. You will say that you invented accusations against my family out of spite because Selwyn ended your engagement. You will destroy every shred of credibility you have built. And if I refuse, then your sister dies, and your parents die, and everyone you have ever cared about dies. Lady Hartley's voice was ice. Do you think we cannot reach them? Do you think Ashworth's little fortress is impenetrable? We have resources you cannot imagine, connections you will never understand. You are desperate. Jessamy took a step forward. The investigation is already begun. Even if I recant, the evidence can be explained away. Forgeries, planted by Ashworth to discredit us. Without your testimony, without your memories of those ledgers, it all falls apart. Jessamy looked at Tansy, saw the terror in her eyes, felt her own heart breaking. She had sworn to protect her sister. She had sworn to see justice done. Now she had to choose between them. If I recant, she said slowly, you release Tansy. You leave my family alone, forever. Agreed. And Hadrian, the Duke? We will deal with him in our own time. Lady Hartley smiled coldly. That is not your concern. It is my concern. If I do this, you leave him alone as well. You are not in a position to negotiate, Miss Thorne. Then kill me. Jessamy spread her hands. Kill me right here, and see how well your plans survive when the Duke finds my body. See how long it takes him to burn everything you have ever built to the ground. Lady Hartley's smile faltered. You think he cares about you that much? I know he does. And saying it aloud, Jessamy realized it was true. Not strategy, not convenience. Something deeper, something neither of them had planned. If you harm me, he will never stop. Not until every Hartley is destroyed. Is that what you want? Before Lady Hartley could respond, a voice cut through the chapel. She is right. Hadrian stepped out of the shadows, and he was not alone. Lord Ashford flanked him on one side, Lord Whitmore on the other. Behind them, 6 armed men spread out to block every exit. How? Lady Hartley's composure cracked. How did you? The servant who delivered your message is one of mine. Deadly calm threaded through every word. Did you think I would leave Jessamy unprotected after your son put his hands on her? This changes nothing. I still have the girl. You have nothing. Hadrian moved forward slowly, deliberately. In approximately 10 minutes, magistrates will arrive at Thorndale Abbey with warrants for your husband's arrest. At the same time, officers will enter the London offices of Hartley and Associates to seize all financial records. And your son is already in custody, having been apprehended attempting to flee to the coast. Lady Hartley's face went white. You planned this, all of it. The meeting, the evidence. The meeting was real. The evidence is real. But yes, we anticipated that you would make exactly this mistake. Hadrian was close now, close enough that Jessamy could see the controlled fury in his eyes. You should have run when you had the chance. Instead, you threatened the woman I love. That was an error you will not survive. The woman I love. Jessamy's breath caught. Lord Whitmore stepped forward. Lady Hartley, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Release the girl. For a moment, Jessamy thought Lady Hartley might fight. Might use Tansy as a hostage, might try to bargain her way free. Then the fight drained out of her. Her grip on Tansy loosened. The armed men moved in, and suddenly Tansy was running, throwing herself into Jessamy's arms. Jess, I was so scared. I know, sweetheart. Jessamy held her tight, tears streaming down her face. But it is over now. It is over. Later, after Lady Hartley had been taken away, and Tansy had been returned to Ashworth under heavy guard, Jessamy found Hadrian in the chapel, staring at the place where they had nearly lost everything. You said something, she began. I said many things. You said I was the woman you love. He turned to face her. In the fading light, his features were softer than she had ever seen them, the masks stripped away. I did. Did you mean it? I never say things I do not mean. He crossed the distance between them slowly, giving her time to retreat. She did not. I did not plan this, Jessamy. I planned to use you, to make you a weapon against my enemies. I did not plan to... To what? To need you. His voice was rough. To think about you every hour of every day. To feel like I cannot breathe when you are in danger. Hadrian, I love you. The words came out like a confession, like a wound finally opened. I do not know how to do this gently, and I do not know how to offer you the kind of courtship you deserve. But I love you, and if you will let me, I will spend the rest of my life proving it. Jessamy reached up and touched his face. This man who had found her in the cold, who had made her a weapon and then made her something more. I did not plan this either, she whispered. But I love you too. I think I have loved you since you called me over from those frozen steps. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she had imagined. Not gentle, not careful. It was desperate and fierce, two people who had nearly lost each other clinging to what they had found. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Hadrian rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Is that a command? It is a request. His lips curved. Though I am willing to beg if necessary. That will not be necessary. She smiled up at him. Yes, I will marry you. The trial of the Hartley family became the scandal of the decade. For 3 weeks, the courtroom in London overflowed with spectators eager to witness the downfall of one of England's most prominent families. Newspapers devoted entire front pages to each day's revelations. Cartoonists competed to produce the most damning caricatures. And through it all, Jessamy sat in the witness gallery, watching justice unfold. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records seized from Hartley and Associates revealed embezzlement totaling over £200,000, stolen from trusts meant to protect orphan children. Guardianship documents showed systematic forgery, signatures of deceased magistrates appearing on papers dated years after their deaths. Testimonies from former servants painted a picture of calculated cruelty. Children stripped of inheritance, shipped to workhouses, their identities erased. And at the center of it all, providing the testimony that connected every fragment into an undeniable whole, stood Jessamy. She spoke for 3 hours on the first day. She described finding the ledgers. She recited names, dates, amounts from memory. She identified documents as genuine or forged, based on details she had observed during her brief access to Lord Hartley's study. When Selwyn's barrister attempted to discredit her, "Is it not true that you were engaged to Lord Hartley's son? That this accusation stems from a woman scorned?" She met his gaze without flinching. "I was engaged to Selwyn Hartley. When I discovered his family's crimes and demanded he make them right, he attempted to kill me. He destroyed my reputation with lies of hysteria. He turned my own family against me. He ensured that on the coldest night of the year, every door in London would be closed to me, and he left me to freeze to death on the streets." She turned to face the courtroom. "I survived, and I am here to ensure that no other child suffers what those 47 children suffered at the hands of this family." The courtroom erupted. When order was restored, Jessamy continued her testimony, her voice never wavering. She spoke of Nathaniel Vance, the Duke's brother, who had been murdered for getting too close to the truth. She spoke of Miss Dorothea Quinn, who had survived St. Crispin's and lived to tell what happened inside its walls. She spoke of every victim whose voice had been silenced, whose story had been erased. By the time she finished, several jurors were weeping openly. The defense attempted to mount a counter-argument. They produced character witnesses who praised the Hartleys' philanthropy. They questioned the reliability of servant testimonies. They suggested that financial irregularities were the work of rogue employees, not systematic family policy. None of it mattered. Lord Aldrich Hartley was found guilty on 17 counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Lady Marguerite was convicted of kidnapping, conspiracy, and accessory to attempted murder. And Selwyn, charming, Golden Selwyn, was convicted of attempted murder, fraud, and the systematic destruction of children's lives. When the verdicts were announced, Jessamy felt Hadrian's hand find hers. She gripped it tightly, tears streaming down her face that she did not bother to hide. "It is done," she whispered. "Not quite." His voice was thick with emotion. "Now comes the sentencing." Lord Hartley received 20 years, Lady Marguerite, 15. Selwyn, convicted on the most serious charges, was sentenced to transportation for life. As the guards led him from the courtroom, Selwyn's eyes found Jessamy in the gallery. For a long moment they simply stared at each other, the man who had left her to die, and the woman who had risen from the cold to destroy him. Then Selwyn looked away, and he was gone. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered to witness the convicted family being transported to prison. Jessamy stood on the steps, Hadrian beside her, watching the black carriages roll away. "How do you feel?" he asked quietly. "I do not know." She shook her head. "I thought I would feel triumphant, vindicated, but mostly I feel empty, tired." She leaned into him, so tired. "Then let me take you home." His arm came around her shoulders. "Ashworth is waiting, and there is still work to be done." "Work?" "The children." He turned her to face him. 47 children were stolen by the Hartleys. Many are dead or lost beyond recovery. But some survived. Some are still in workhouses, still waiting for someone to remember they exist. "You want to find them. We want to find them." His eyes held hers. "If you are willing." Jessamy thought of Miss Dorothea Quinn, whose eyes had held too much knowledge of cruelty. She thought of the names in those ledgers, children reduced to figures in a column, their lives stolen before they had truly begun. I am willing." "Then let us go home." He kissed her forehead gently. "Our work is just beginning." 6 months later, Jessamy stood in the great hall of Ashworth, watching sunlight stream through the tall windows and fall across the faces of the children gathered there. 17 survivors, 17 young people who had been found in workhouses across England, their identities confirmed through painstaking research and legal documentation. 17 lives that had been stolen were now being returned. She called it the Ashworth Foundation. Hadrian called it her empire. "Miss Jessamy!" A girl of about 12 came running up, clutching a letter. "Miss Jessamy, look! My brother wrote to me from his school. He says he is learning Latin." "That is wonderful, Molly." Jessamy crouched to examine the letter with appropriate solemnity. "And are you learning your Latin as well?" "I am trying." Molly made a face. "It is very difficult." "Difficult things often are. But you are stronger than you know." The girl beamed and ran off to show her letter to the other children. Jessamy watched her go, her heart full to bursting. "You are good at this." She turned to find Hadrian leaning against the doorway, watching her with an expression she had come to recognize as love. "Good at what?" "Healing." He crossed the room to stand beside her. "Giving them back what was stolen." "We cannot give back lost years." "No, but you can give them future ones." He took her hand. "That is no small thing." They stood together, watching the children laugh and play in the great hall that had once felt so cold and forbidding. Tutors moved among them, offering guidance. Servants brought refreshments. And in a corner, Miss Dorothea Quinn, now employed as a counselor for the foundation, sat with a young boy who had not spoken since his rescue, holding his hand in patient silence. "I have news," Hadrian said quietly. "Good news or bad?" Unexpected news? He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Your father wrote to me. He is asking if your parents might visit. He says... Hadrian paused, something uncertain crossing his face. He says he wishes to apologize. Properly. Jessamy took the letter, reading her father's careful script. The words were hesitant, painfully formal, but beneath them she could sense genuine remorse. I failed my daughter when she needed me most. I believed lies because they were easier than truth. I do not expect forgiveness, but I would like the chance to earn it. What do you think? Hadrian asked. I think... She folded the letter slowly. I think people can change. I think second chances matter. She looked up at him. I think I would like to try. Then we will invite them. He kissed her forehead. For Christmas, perhaps. Christmas. Jessamy smiled. A year since you found me on these frozen steps. A year since you changed everything. His voice was soft. I thought I was rescuing a weapon. Instead, I found... Found what? Home. He cupped her face in his hands. You are my home, Jessamy. Whatever else happens, wherever we go, that will never change. She kissed him there, in the great hall filled with rescued children and autumn sunlight, surrounded by the life they had built from ashes and determination. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I know. He smiled. I love you too. More than strategy, more than revenge, more than anything I planned or expected. Good. She pulled back, grinning. Because I have news as well. What news? Jessamy took his hand and pressed it against her stomach. The foundation is going to have a new member. In about 6 months. For a moment, Hadrian simply stared at her. Then, understanding dawned, and his face transformed into something she had never seen before. Pure, unguarded joy. A child, he breathed. Our child. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she felt tears against her neck. The Duke of Ashworth, feared by enemies and respected by allies, weeping with happiness in the middle of his great hall. I did not know, he said hoarsely. I did not know I could feel this much. Neither did I. She held him just as tightly. But we have the rest of our lives to learn. Outside the windows, the Yorkshire moors stretched toward the horizon, wild and beautiful and free. Inside, children laughed and played, healing from wounds that would never fully disappear but would no longer define them. And in the center of it all, 2 people who had found each other in the cold stood wrapped in each other's arms, building a future neither had dared to imagine. Jessamy had been turned away once, left in the dark, abandoned by everyone she trusted, certain that her life was over. But a duke had stood and called her over. A duke had seen her when no one else would look. A duke had chosen her, not because she was useful, but because she was worth choosing. And together, they had proven that even the coldest nights could lead to the warmest mornings, if you were brave enough to survive them. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story touched something in you, the fight for justice, the power of being chosen, the strength it takes to survive, I hope you will share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you are listening from. If you are ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You are the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even in the coldest moments, love can find a way.